A Twist of Fate. My name is Alex. I'm 28, and this is the story of how life twisted in ways I never imagined. I grew up in a middle class family with my parents, Rick and Linda, and my younger sister, Emily. Emily was always the golden child. At 25, she's 3 years younger than me, but she's always had a special place in my parents' heart. While I was the problem child, Emily could do no wrong. It wasn't always like this. As a kid, I remember my parents being loving and supportive, but something changed as we got older. I became more rebellious, and the more I tried to assert my independence, the more my parents pushed back. They never took the time to understand me, only seeing me as a troublemaker. By the time I was 16, things reached a breaking point. One day, after yet another argument about my attitude, Rick and Linda made a decision that would change everything. They kicked me out, sent me to live with Uncle Jim and Aunt Susan. I remember the feeling of abandonment like it was yesterday. But even as I packed my bags, they had the nerve to tell me it was for my own good. I was devastated, hurt, but mostly angry. After I moved out, Rick and Linda spread rumors about me in the family and our neighborhood. They told anyone who would listen that I was impossible to deal with, that I didn't listen, that I was a bad influence on Emily. It felt like they were trying to erase me from their lives, making it easier for them to justify their actions. When I moved in with Uncle Jim and Aunt Susan, it was like stepping into another world. They welcomed me with open arms. Uncle Jim, in his late 50s, was a gentle giant of a man, and Aunt Susan, who was in her early 50s, had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. They never judged me for being kicked out. Instead, they gave me the space and support I needed to figure things out. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Uncle Jim helped me with my studies, and Aunt Susan made sure I had everything I needed to thrive. I began to excel in school. I wasn't the troublemaker my parents had made me out to be. I just needed the right environment. By the time I graduated high school, I had a scholarship to a local college. Things were finally looking up. My parents didn't reach out, not even to congratulate me on my graduation. They were too busy praising Emily, who was on her way to an expensive university out of state. It was clear where their priorities lay. I started college with high hopes, studying engineering, something I was genuinely passionate about. Uncle Jim was so proud of me, always asking about my classes and projects. But during my second year, tragedy struck. Uncle Jim passed away suddenly from a heart attack. It was a shock to all of us. Aunt Susan was devastated. She had lost the love of her life, and I had lost the man who had become more of a father to me than Rick ever was. With Uncle Jim gone, Aunt Susan needed help. She was struggling to keep things together, so I made the difficult decision to drop out of college to take care of her. I knew it was what Uncle Jim would have wanted. It wasn't easy, but we became closer during this time. Aunt Susan was like a mother to me, more than Linda ever had been. Despite everything, I never heard from Rick or Linda. No condolences, no offers of help. They were too wrapped up in their lives, their golden child, to care. Life was hard, but Aunt Susan and I managed. One day, while I was out running errands, I bought a lottery ticket on a whim. I didn't think much of it, just something to distract me from the stress of life. A few days later, I checked the numbers and my heart nearly stopped. I had won the jackpot, millions of dollars, enough money to change my life forever. I couldn't believe it. The first person I told was Aunt Susan. She was overjoyed, but also cautious. "Don't tell anyone else, Alex," she warned. "Not yet. You need to think about what this means." I took her advice to heart. I kept the news quiet, only sharing it with a financial advisor to figure out the best way to manage the money. I wanted to make sure Aunt Susan was taken care of for the rest of her life. After all, she was the one who had always been there for me. During this time, Rick and Linda's life was falling apart. Emily, who was now 25, had gotten herself into a mountain of debt. Her lavish lifestyle had caught up with her, and my parents were struggling to bail her out. They were desperate, but still I heard nothing from them. I thought maybe they had finally moved on, but I was wrong. The news of my win somehow leaked out. Maybe it was a slip up by my financial advisor or someone I'd confided in. Either way, the next thing I knew, Rick and Linda were knocking on my door, all smiles and fake concern. They pretended to care about me, asking how I was, telling me they missed me, but I could see right through them. They wanted money. They were drowning in debt, thanks to Emily, and they saw me as their lifeline. They tried to guilt trip me, saying that as their son, I had an obligation to help them. But I wasn't that naive kid anymore. I saw them for what they were, manipulative and selfish. When I refused, things got ugly. They threatened to take legal action, claiming that as my biological parents, they were entitled to a share of my winnings. It was absurd, but they were serious. They hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit against me. It was one of the most stressful times in my life. I couldn't believe that the people who were supposed to love me would go this far. During this time, I met Jessica. She was 27 and a lawyer assigned to my case. From the moment we met, there was a connection. She was smart, kind, and she genuinely cared about my situation. We spent hours together, working on my defense, and slowly, our professional relationship turned into something more. For the first time, I found someone who understood me, who was on my side. The court case was a nightmare. Rick and Linda's lawyer tried to paint me as an ungrateful son who owed everything to his parents. They dug up old stories about my teenage years, trying to use them against me. But Jessica was brilliant. She tore apart their arguments, piece by piece, showing the court the truth about my upbringing and how they had abandoned me. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. Rick and Linda's lawsuit was thrown out, and they were left with nothing. I was relieved, but also saddened. Not for them, but for the fact that things had come to this. They had destroyed any chance of reconciliation, all for the sake of money. After the case, I cut all ties with Rick, Linda, and Emily. I didn't want anything to do with them ever again. They were toxic, and I needed to move on with my life. Jessica and I grew closer, and eventually, we started dating. She was my rock during all of this, and I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. With the lawsuit behind me, I focused on building a new life. I invested the money wisely, making sure Aunt Susan was taken care of for the rest of her life. Jessica and I moved in together, and I started a small business, something that I'd always dreamed of. Life was finally good. Rick and Linda continued to struggle. Their financial problems only got worse, and Emily's life was a mess. They never recovered, and I never looked back. I had learned a lot from this experience about family, love, and what truly matters in life. It wasn't money, but the people who stood by you when things were tough. Jessica and I got married a year later. Aunt Susan was there, of course, beaming with pride. We've built a life together filled with love, respect, and mutual support. I'm happier than I ever thought possible. And I know that Uncle Jim would be proud of the man I've become. So this is a story of how life can take unexpected turns, how those who are supposed to love you can betray you, and how true love and loyalty can come from the most unexpected places. I'm grateful for everything I've been through, because it's made me who I am today, and that's something no amount of